So what are the best ways to stand out and attract the right viewers on YouTube for your channel? Well, today I'm joined by Nate from our Think Media team, and we're going to talk about the power of building a strong brand on YouTube. So Nate, how you doing today, man?
Doing wonderful. And I think this is important to note. Okay, first of all, what is a brand? We've heard this term, but maybe we should define it for everyone. A brand is simply, it could be anything. It could be Think Media, it could be Starbucks, but also for those who are starting out, a personal brand is something that everyone can have and have accessible to them. And so when people think of personal brands, I think of a lot of people's face, how they're portrayed on camera, what's their vibe.
Yeah.
So Craig, I want to talk a little bit more about what makes a strong brand, even if it's just a personal brand.
Well, I think it's important to know, like, why is it even important to focus on personal branding? Is it something you should focus on or not? And we think it really is something that you should be intentionally trying to shape, because whether you like it or not, the nature of putting content out into the world, people are getting a perceived idea about who you are. And ideally, you'd be able to intentionally shape that based on some of the tips we'll actually talk about in this video. But I think why building a personal brand is important is it establishes you first and foremost as an authority in your niche. It's really important for people to view you as maybe a subject matter expert. It gives you credibility too as a creator.
You want to be known for something rather than like a lot of things, especially at the start. You want to be able to have influence in a small area and be an authority. And we all have different proficiencies in different areas. So I think this is really important, is asking yourself, what do you want to be known for? And what are your values? Things you're not going to compromise on, things you're not going to cross the line. Establishing that first and foremost is going to help you have a strong foundation for when your channel does grow. You know, if you start to waver and then your personal brand, you know, becomes something that wasn't before. And these things will always flux and change, but at least having a few strong values, and that's what we have here at Think Media. What are our values? You know, we want to help others create better content, and we want to inspire those to do the same. And we're not going to compromise on certain values that we've had. So we're going to make sure we're always authentic. We're going to make sure we're always promoting products that we truly believe in. So having those things first and foremost is going to help you keep that strong foundation. So when things do kind of sway, then you're always on that strong foundation.
Yep, that's great. Well, we're going to dive into these 5 tips for building a strong brand to stand out. An important note here is, like, you and I aren't necessarily coaches or experts on personal branding, but you and I over the years have been building up our own YouTube channels and our different social profiles up to tens of thousands of subscribers and followers across different channels. And so we're not experts, but we can speak from our place of authority and working for an organization like Think Media that has a really strong brand and presence. So these are tips we've adopted personally, and we just want people to walk away with some good, tangible tips.
Let's start with number 1, defining your niche and your audience. And even if those words are somewhat, you're not familiar with that, just who do you want to talk to? Who is the person you're trying to reach to? For many people, it's probably people like yourself. People you have, maybe you've gone through a transformative journey and you want to help those who are also on that journey. Maybe you are losing weight, maybe you have lost weight, and you want to show where you struggled with. So that is your who. Who do you actually want to talk to? If you try to reach everybody, you end up reaching nobody, especially at the start, focusing on a few people and having a deeper connection rather than just trying to get surface level impact, because then it's going to be a lot harder to go that route because a lot of people are doing it. But if you reach specifically to a very specific person, then you'll likely to have a stronger brand and build connections a lot faster.
Yeah, I think especially at the start too, it's really important to focus on who's your core target, who's the person you're speaking to. And usually you're positioned best to speak to the person maybe that you were 1 to 2 years ago, and you're just a couple of steps ahead of that person. So I think that's a really good piece of wisdom somebody once told me, of like, listen, Craig, you don't got to try to speak to everybody, but where were you a year ago, and how can you lead somebody who's just a little bit behind in their, you know, camera career? If I was shooting like corporate marketing promos or wedding filmmaking or concerts, like, how can I coach up somebody who's just like a year or two behind? I think that's great.
Let's take a look at Think Media as an example. And Sean, when he started out, you know, there were a lot of camera filmmakers out there, but there was a very, very small amount of people who were focused on the YouTube side of things. So what do you start with? The camera, the technology, but filtered it through a YouTuber's perspective. And one of our most popular videos he's done is best camera for YouTube. And we continually talk about that over and over again. But from there, you also don't have to be intimidated with how you start is not where you are going to be. You know, if you can start out in tech, but we've also expanded out to coaching, YouTube strategy, all these different things. And we're constantly thinking about bigger and better things.
Yeah.
And that is going to happen over time. But I think it's really helpful just to kind of think about what can you be helpful or what can you already have experience in. That's going to be just so much helpful rather than trying to like learn something as you go.
Yeah, Sean is, when he started Think Media, he didn't think that he would set out to like necessarily be known as the YouTube tech creator, people who want to build YouTube studios or get started on YouTube. But he found that niche and he really owned it. And we continue to own it here at Think Media as like, that's part of our core identity, helping YouTube creators build their channels. But again, like you're saying, you can always expand out later. So now we're working with business owners, entrepreneurs, all sorts of people, and helping them build their personal brands.
I love that. So let's talk about balancing between passion and market demand. For example, for those who maybe already have an audience, but they're ready to kind of expand out, they're ready to grow in a different area, maybe changing niches. We get a lot of asked questions about how do I change my niche, or if I want to go in a different direction, maybe it's not quite what I was doing, I'm bored, burnout. How would you go about starting to pivot, change topics, change even different niches?
That's a great question, Nate. And something we think about here is sort of this concept of if you already have a built up audience of people who love your work, you know, you want to keep feeding them the stuff that they subscribed for. So if somebody subscribed to you, we often teach at Think Media, you don't necessarily want to upload a video. Never upload a video that somebody didn't subscribe for, right? It's confusing to them. It's like, oh wait, this feels so not familiar. It's like off-brand, I guess you could say. And so something that we would suggest is take an approach where it's like a 2 for them and then 1 for you approach. And how we define that is like continue making content that your audience is going to love. Create 2 videos. Your next 2 videos will be stuff that it's guaranteed that they're going to love. It's in your niche. It's a YouTube camera review. It's an editing tutorial setup. But then maybe your 3rd video in that sequence is one that you personally want to do. It's like a passion project or something you want to try to see if you can break into a new niche or expand your niche to include more people. I think that's an interesting approach and something that I personally would like to explore more, even at Think Media, of like, how could we do maybe some sort of like vlogging stuff or behind the scenes, getting an inside look at our creative process. That's a little bit different than the kinds of videos we typically would make, but it's sort of like our niche, but adjacent to our niche a little bit and trying to capture a wider reach. That's an approach I think that can work.
Yeah, so I was at Vid Summit and there are several different creators talking about that exact thing, what they started out with and the different phases they kind of went through. There was someone who's did a video about leggings, but then they wanted to expand out because you could only talk about leggings for so much. So they were so afraid to step outside the box. But the thing is, and probably you feel the same way, is when you subscribe and you follow someone, you're kind of subscribed for them and their personality. And it is interesting as a viewer to kind of see what other people are interested in, if it is in the related realm. So people who were subscribing to her weren't just subscribed for the legs. They think there's a whole broader niche, a broader scope they could and were ready to expand into. So I think it's important to do those passion projects to keep you from burning out, but also, you do expand, you get different audiences, and they're all filtered because if you've done a good job about showing your personality, then they'll love you and they'll want to watch those other things.
Yeah, it's curious that example you give. Even I think about that creator who does leggings. I don't even know who this is, but perhaps he or she focuses more on like the fashion side of what leggings and building outfits based around like the leggings. But you could also be building up a huge tribe of people who are interested in like the fitness side. So you could be showing like behind the scenes stuff of you like working out and like what are the best leggings for running, for lifting weights or stuff like that. So there's different ways you could approach it. And you don't really know who's watching you because of the specific content of leggings, but there might be different niches within your existing content base.
I love that. Let's move on to our second tip, finding your unique value proposition, UVP. So this idea is what makes you different? Because I think every individual, coming to YouTube, there is only one of you, so there is room for you.
Yeah.
And so let's talk about like how do you first let's identify what makes you different. Maybe you're not self-aware just yet.
Yeah.
I feel like that's a pain point that you have and you face. How would you start asking yourself these questions of what makes you different? How would you go about it, Greg?
Yeah, that's great. Well, I mean, a phrase we often say here is like your vibe will attract your tribe. So I think your personality and just getting in touch with like the more you even review your videos, you start editing your content and even comparing it to your competitors out there. And you don't necessarily have to view people as competitors, but if they're in the same niche as you, they're creating similar content. So it is kind of curious to see what is their personality, what is their angle and the strategy they have to attract people to their channel, and then juxtapose that to what you're doing and in your personality type. You don't have to try to match their energy and their even content formats. That's a mistake that I actually made pretty early on, was I would see these creators out there and I try to like replicate their video and their tone, and then it just didn't feel very authentic.
And people see through that and they'll remind them, well, you're just mimicking Marquez Brownlee. I'm just going to go watch MKBHD.
Exactly. And so I think a great way to attract the right tribe is by speaking through your experience. And so whatever you've done, even if it's, you don't feel like it's very clear, you can try to still explain, like, for me, when I was first starting, I was a lot in like the corporate marketing space. I would do wedding filmmaking. I would do concerts. It's kind of like this mesh of like video production. I didn't really know like, okay, what is my niche exactly? I could talk about any one of these things. And then I started just making content around all of these, like creator workflow, how to shoot concerts, how to get a press pass for a show, but also how to edit a wedding film, like all these different things. They didn't really come together, but something they all had in common was I was shooting on Sony cameras. And very quickly I started to find like, oh, people are most curious about the tech that I'm using. And then I even found a further down niche of like really budget, like used Sony cameras that people can find on eBay. And so very quickly my personal brand became to grow on Instagram and YouTube as Craig's the guy that I can go to for information about like cameras that are under $500 that I can get for Sony cameras. And so that's kind of what I became known as, which is kind of, I didn't seek that out.
Right.
And at first I wasn't thinking like I'd be the guy, budget Sony stuff. I wanted to be more like filmmaking tips and strategies, but that's just not where I landed. And my vibe, my content style, my expertise attracted the right audience. And that's where I found myself.
I think it takes a lot of observation to do that. And I would even go further if you're still struggling to have some close ones, loved ones that you could really sit down to and ask like, hey, like, what is it that I'm like good at, or my vibe? Well, what is attractive? And I think for me, just over time, when I made videos, there'll be a lot of comments saying, I really appreciate how chill your videos are. I appreciate your voice, your character.
Yes.
So
dude, that's feedback I give you all the time. I watch your videos for review. I'm like, dude, I feel so relaxed when I watch it. You have such a calming voice. So I totally agree with whoever gave you that advice.
Right.
It's spot on.
So it's helpful feedback to like kind of double down on those things. And again, if you can talk to someone close by and just say, hey, like, what is it that I'm like really good at that I could actually speak to? And that should be helpful just to kind of give you that direction.
Yeah. And basically, if we boil down this whole section here, we're talking about differentiation. So when somebody sees Nate and they see Craig's face, or they see whoever's listening's face, right? Or they see their name pop up in the YouTube feeds, their little profile icon. What do they associate with you? That's really important to remember. You're building a brand, and they associate feelings and thoughts and emotions when they see Nate's face or Craig's face, right? And so hopefully we can intentionally shape the viewers' thoughts about us by building a strong brand.
We're talking about standing out, and I think a lot of people's psychology is to fit in, stay in. Yeah. And so it's a totally different experience to kind of stand out. And so it's leaning into your quirks, the mistakes you make. What is those intricate things that you just do naturally? Yeah. So, even podcast discussions is a great way to really get to know someone and focus in and really get to understand their personality. So maybe you do record a long video of you talking, maybe with a friend, and you begin to kind of identify what you do and kind of like amplify that a little bit more.
That's really good. Well, let's dive into our third tip here. We're going to talk about, the power of building a brand by building a loyal community. So this is just like vanity metrics. It's not just like number of followers or subscriber counts. This is building a loyal base of people who actually are there because of who you are And you can build this really slowly over time. And ideally, we're attracting the right eyeballs, not just quantity, but the quality of subscribers can really help. And there's a concept that a lot of people maybe have heard of by writer, editor Kevin Kelly called the 1,000 True Fans model. I think it's a really interesting model. It basically outlines, it's an article that you can read online, but that you really only need like 1,000 people who truly believe in your business idea or you as a creator to be set for life. And if you even break down the numbers, like if you had like a $67 product and 1,000 people, like you put that out once a year, like a $67 offer or a coaching program that was $67 a year and 1,000 people bought it, that's a $67,000 a year salary. That's higher than the average salary in America. And that's just by having 1,000 people who truly believe in your idea. So the quality of the people engaging in your brand is so important. But what are your thoughts about like, building community, not really worrying about these subscriber counts?
Yeah, I would rather have, like, even though now like my subscribers on YouTube is 50,000, it's like, I almost would rather have like those like 10,000 that were just super passionate following, willing to buy anything that I make or whatnot. So it's really not about the number of subscribers. I think that's kind of liberating for a lot of people is don't think about how many subscribers or followers you need. Think about the quality of them. How are you going to serve them? And that by far is going to be super massive. It's even like you're talking about like financially, but even just like building that strong community. Even if you do get 1,000 people, if 500 are commenting on the video, that's really impressive. Imagine speaking in front of an audience of 1,000 people.
It's a ton of people.
That's a lot of people. Well, and that's a lot of influence.
I think this is why we often preach that long form content is really important, even over the short form. And you can make a great following and a great living over short form vertical content, but there's something in particular about deep diving, spending 10, 20, 30 minutes. I mean, we're probably going to go 20 or 30 minutes in this podcast episode. People can get to know us and get the sense for what our values are in a way longer podcast conversation versus a 31-second YouTube short where they're just getting a tiny bit of information. And we know that on YouTube, oftentimes those short form viewers are not converting to long form subscriptions. And in my opinion, it's a lot easier to monetize and create a loyal community around people who are engaged for 20 or 30 minutes in a podcast style setting versus a YouTube short.
Well, how would you go about trying to improve the engagement of your videos if you already have followers? What are some tips, like practical tips that you could do today to start building engagement?
I think that's a great question. I think one is, especially when you have a small audience, engage your community as much as you can. So in YouTube, that's engaging the comment section, responding to every comment you possibly can. That's Gary Vaynerchuk's advice typically, Gary V, any book you read from Gary or watch social media clips, he's huge on responding to every single comment. Even at Think Media, on our Wednesday meetings, we have a dedicated time where we spend 15 to 20 minutes, what we call love bombs, where we drop comments and respond to our community in the YouTube tab. So I think that's a really important way. Engage your community in comment section, leverage the community tab as well. You can do polls, question and responses, upload photos, BTS stuff. There's lots of ways you can engage on
One
YouTube.
thing I did when I was starting out, and I still continue to do, is even if I didn't have an audience, I would be finding like-minded creators and comment on their videos. Every time there's a new video and I enjoyed it, I'd leave a comment, and I built up a lot of friendships over time through YouTube, through commenting, checking them out. They would check out my channel, not like because I was asking them to, just because I was showing up in a regular face. And for the first time here at NAB, I got to meet a lot of those people face to face for the first time. It was super cool to have those friendships, which can lead to collaborations and bigger and better things.
That's a really great point. Hang out in the spaces where your community lives. Maybe they're on Discord. Maybe they're on a Twitter, or X. Maybe they're on like an X group or something that you can get involved with. Or maybe if you speak to professionals, we know that LinkedIn is a great place for professionals where they hang out and are in a business mindset. There's lots of places that you can go to hang out in the spaces and areas where your community is active.
Okay, so let's talk about this next point. Create value content. What does that mean? What is value content?
Yeah, so value-driven content is a concept of content continues to be king. And when you can create valuable content that leads your viewer, and the first person that comes to mind is Caleb Pike, DSLR video shooter. I love Caleb. We both know Caleb. I feel like both of our styles have heavily been influenced by Caleb, and we'll show some B-roll of Caleb even on the screen so you can check out his channel. But he's a creator who just constantly gives really valuable solutions. And I don't think Caleb necessarily sat out to build this really strong personal brand. His channel is literally DSLR video shooter. It's not even associated with his name necessarily, but he's by producing these really niche like product solutions, and now he's even has started his own company that he creates products, custom camera solutions for creators. And all of this is just birthed out of who Caleb is as an individual. He values helping people, providing unique solutions to creators. So in any case, Caleb is just kind of went this like educational route. But there's many other ways that creators can also create value-driven content. What do you think are a couple other ways?
I'd say there's probably two other ones. It would be inspirational as well as entertainment value.
Yeah.
So Mr. Beast would be an example of entertainment. And then inspirational might be like motivational content. Maybe you have a really powerful story testimony that you share. I think of Sean when it comes to inspiration, when it comes to building a YouTube channel. Every time I hear a story, I get more fired up about making YouTube videos.
Sure.
And so I even think about, I created a video series called Filmmaking Advice for 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And I just took these popular filmmakers who all had advice that was free on the internet and kind of compiled it together in a nice short film. And that continues to inspire people. I get comments all the time. This changed my life. I'm fired up about filmmaking again. And that's really powerful. Even though I wasn't necessarily in the video, people still come to the channel, subscribe based off of the inspiration people felt.
Yeah.
They may know what they need to do, but everyone needs that encouragement from time to time.
That's great. And we often talk about creating even search-based content can be a great way. So, content that's like how to or best camera setup. So that's an approach where you can try to create, show up in search traffic is a strategy. But there's also like a strategy of value by riding what we call trend surfing, like riding the wave of certain trends. Could you kind of talk about like the difference between like creating search-based content or trends? What's your experience with that as a creator?
I think that's an opportunity based off a trend where people can actually get to meet you, because search-based videos, they search you up, maybe they get the answer and then maybe they leave. But when it comes to trend surfing, okay, what's happening in the news right now? I see a lot of new creators, new faces based off of what's happening, current events.
That's good.
And it's like a handshake moment where I'm introduced to them. And if I like their vibe, if I like the quality of their videos, I'm more inclined to watch another video, especially if it's been helpful.
Yeah.
An example is Clear Value Tax, which I know Sean's talked about before. But I watched one of his videos. Okay, it was very simple. He's very simple with his videos, but it's extremely educational. And I liked his vibe, very clear, constructive. Not a lot of bias, but he will give his opinion and he clearly states that. And then sure enough, I'm watching another video based off another current event. So that's a great way just to meet new faces, is based off those trendy things. But like you said, balancing that with something search-based that is what we call evergreen, something that can be seen throughout the year. And having a mix of those both can help grow your channel steadily, but also you'll have like these little kicks when there's popular trending stuff happen.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point of view, Nate. I love that. Let's talk about our last point for the day, why mindset matters so much in personal branding.
Yeah.
Having the right mindset, the mental game is just as important as all these tactical strategy tips, because if you're spend too much time worrying about maybe what people think about you, your personal brand or your channel, it could get overwhelming. And then even at times, you could maybe feel like you're a little bit behind the curve if you're just starting out. Maybe you have a low subscriber count, you're not getting a lot of views. It can feel overwhelming. So what has your approach been as you were starting your channel? And actually, you've seen your channel grow over time. I've seen it. We continue to see subscriber count grow here at Think Media. What are some of your tips for creators who are trying to start a personal brand, but they don't want to get burned out, or they feel maybe they're trying to overcome this imposter syndrome of like they feel kind of like a poser, like this is not, I don't know what to do. What are your thoughts on this?
I think everyone's probably experienced some sort of imposter syndrome, meaning that they feel inadequate for what they're teaching on. So if you're trying to do educational content, but you're not really an expert, it's like, you can feel that imposter syndrome. But over time, I think there's a lot of experience that you do know, and just to lean into what makes you different, right? People have all these different life experiences. I think about those who are starting a channel that are maybe 40s, 50s, 60s, and they have all this life experience that they can teach someone who's, maybe younger and what they went through. It's super informative. So again, I wouldn't say someone who's 40, 50, try to keep up with what 20-year-olds are doing, because you don't have to.
It's
lean
different.
into what makes you you, and you'll be a lot more comfortable in that space because you're speaking from authority.
Yeah, I think that's great. I think clarity too for your channel and the vision for your content strategy can come by being consistent and showing up, creating content day after day. We often like to tell people just make one video a week. One video a week, especially if you're part-time and you have a full-time job, you have a family. That was actually me. When I started really trying to grind on YouTube, I was having kids. My wife and I were young, married couple, and we still kind of are. We got more kids coming. You just never know what's going to happen nowadays. But anyways, but just finding clarity and like you'll find your niche as you begin to post more content, creating more content. And that's what I found. I know you've found similar.
And sharing those personal anecdotes, those stories, I think just is very interesting to people be able to gauge who you are, who your values are. So leaning into that, your humor, I would say if you're still trying to understand like what makes you you, I would say follow 3 creators that really inspire you and take note of when are they sharing a personal anecdote? When are they how are they themselves being unique? And then try to take note of that same for you. What would you like to incorporate more of? Do you want to incorporate more storytelling, more humor? There's several different approaches, but that's the fun about it. You're just being inspired by different individuals and pulling from several different people, not just people in your channel niche, but also through different mediums, painting, music, films. I think I've been inspired by all those things, and that kind of bleeds through the content that I make here. And just to encourage those who are starting out, you don't need to have all this in one go before you start making your videos. I do encourage people to start messy, and that's what I've done when I started my channel is I didn't have all of this to a T. It's something you learn and continue to build over time. So don't stress. Don't be too concerned about this. But it's good to have maybe the next 2-3 things you want to work on and slowly start to incorporate this into building a stronger brand.
Amazing, Nate. Well, great conversation today. If you are wanting to dive deeper into some of these topics or building a personal brand or a YouTube channel this year, actually, we have a free training that you can check out at thinkmasterclass.com. It's a great resource, free training. You'll get to spend about an hour with Sean Cannell as he walks you through some of these tips and strategies for growing a YouTube brand. So you can check that out. We'll link it here in this end card as well as down in the description below. And if you want to watch an additional video from our Think Media podcast channel, you can click that right here on the screen or tap the screen to watch that as well.